When O.J. Simpson was accused of murder back in 1994, I was in law school. And like the rest of America, I watched the trial gavel to gavel. Well, the smash success of the FX miniseries, The People vs. O.J. Simpson, American Crime Story, has proven once again that everyone still likes to talk about the trial of the century.
All right, back on the record in the Simpson matter. Mr. Simpson is again present before the court with his counsel, Mr. Shapiro, Mr. Cochran, Mr. Blazier, people represented by Miss Clark, Mr. Darden, Mr. Goldberg, and Mr. Gordon. Morning, counsel.
Morning, Your Honor.
All right, counsel, anything we need to take up before we proceed with the next witness?
The O.J. Simpson trial has brought up the lack of attention to domestic abuse, police policies, and action and attention to racial profiling. As the ex-NFL player was tried for murdering his ex-wife and her friend, America was on the edge of their seats watching how this gets played out. Most of the black community believed that O.J. was being accused of something that he did not do, while the white community said that he had. 95 million people with 95 million different opinions, all thinking if O.J. Simpson is guilty or not. The communities and their opinions on this trial proved how divided they are. Even in present day, their answers are still divided. This case helped see the reality of abuse and the need of racial justice. America has created new policies and laws to improve and to not have this type of incident happen again. Once this was brought into light, we saw and gained much knowledge on many things. The O.J. Simpson trial was an awakening on the racial profiling in and out of sports, policies, and community.
This case was a very messy trial which included ethical issues, racism, large legal violations, and problems with evidence collection. The national media was also heavily involved in this case, which only made things worse. Due to all of this, the world never came to a unanimous conclusion of what happened that night. On June 12, 1994, Nicole Brown Simpson, the ex-wife of O.J. Simpson, attended a dinner with her family. Her mother left her sunglasses at the restaurant, and her good friend Ronald Goldman offered to drop them off at her Brentwood home. They were then found gruesomely murdered. During the same time frame, O.J. Simpson's limousine driver was waiting to pick up O.J. and using the call button at the end of his driveway to try to reach him. After not getting a response for over 20 minutes, the driver saw a man matching O.J.'s description hurrying up the driveway of O.J.'s estate. Right after this, O.J. finally answered the limousine driver's calls, claiming that he overslept and just got out of the shower. As O.J. had a habit of being late, the limousine driver moved on and took him to the airport where he boarded American Airlines flight number 668 to Chicago. He was contacted by police the next morning and returned to find his home covered in police tape and cardboard tags marked blood. He fled the scene, causing suspicion, and was a part of one of the biggest police chases in history. When the trial finally began, there were so many issues, one being that race was a huge aspect of this case. Judge Ito, the judge for the case, stated, "This is one of the remaining unsolved problems of our society, and for those of us who grew up in the 60s and had hoped this was going to go away, it's a big disappointment." Mark Furman, one of the first investigators to arrive on scene, was reported to be known as a very racist individual, using the N-word at the scene of the crime and using other slurs in multiple instances. In the past, he also admitted to having planted evidence to help secure convictions. This proved him to not be a reliable source in the case.
The case brought much suspicion, as for the night he killed both Nicole Brown and Ronald Goldman, he booked a flight that night to Chicago. The next day he returned and found his home invaded by police and police cars. That day he was interviewed but not arrested. 5 days after the murder, he was ordered to surrender, but then decided to flee in a white Ford Bronco. This led to a chase raid on the freeway and was all on network television, catching 95 million American eyes, until he finally surrendered and was arrested. During the trial, there were two sides, the defense attorney saying he was wrongly accused, and the prosecutors discussing how he was a controlling husband. Till the defense attorney requested for O.J. Simpson to try on a pair of gloves, which were worn by the killer, but ended up not fitting correctly and all charges were dropped. He was ordered to pay the Brown and Goldman family $33.5 million in damages. Till September 2007, he was charged with kidnapping and armed robbery, and many other felonies in Los Angeles hotel and casino. He was found guilty and was sentenced up to 33 years in prison but was granted a parole for good behavior in July 2017. He was released on October 1st, 2017, and now is free at age 75, living in Las Vegas.
And this pattern is going to be reproduced. In other words, this pattern is going to represent these features precisely. You would have this shoe making a pattern that agreed with one of the other shoes.
In this video, it shows the trial that is talking about the clues of the investigation with all forms of DNA. It shows pictures of the footprint in the investigation and the shoe size claiming if it was OJ's shoe that he wore. In the other OJ case that shows a demonstration finding out if the gloves were fitted perfectly for OJ. At that they thought the case for OJ was going to be acquitted. The court showed as much proof as they possibly could. The judge still doesn't believe it's him. This brings a shocking message to the world that he has got away with something that not a lot of people would get away with. Even though they found the DNA, they still don't believe it's him. When it comes to being a superstar athlete, a lot of people that think that you're a good guy and they don't think you would do anything that's harmful to anybody. And now and then there have been multiple trials that involve athletes like Kobe Bryant and Mike Tyson. It shocks the civil rights movement in all kinds of ways because a black man has killed a white woman who is his wife. They let him go because he is a celebrity, but if another black man killed a white woman, it's a whole different story. This shows how unfair life is when one person is similar to all of us and get away with something that is impossible.
Does that mean that these characteristics that Mr. Simpson has that are also found in the Bundy Walk bloodstain are only found in approximately 1 out of 170 million Caucasians or African Americans?
Yes, approximately.
Describe that material or that bloodstaining as matching Nicole Brown. Is that right?
That's correct.
Can you include him as a candidate who could have worn the shoes that created the impressions in this case?
Yes, I could include him as a candidate for possibly having worn those shoes.
Come into the entranceway of the house. This time there was an answer, which was Mr. Simpson. He told me that he overslept and he just got out of the shower and he'd be down in a minute.